Official. So welcome, Ian, and I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody, and then if you could unmute yourself, then you'll be all set to go, and then we'll have some questions probably for you. Okay.
Okay.
I've muted everyone. Oh, okay, good. You're good to go.
Oh, awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much, especially Maureen. Thank you for inviting me to come. For those who don't know me, my name is Ian Roberts. I'm the executive director of Camp Home Mita Koda, so located outside of Cleveland, about 20 minutes from Beechwood area in Newberry, Ohio. Really, I just want to give you a little bit of the background of camp itself, what we've been up to, how the pandemic has kind of affected us, and how the Lions have been a great supporter for so many years. Generally, when I chat with these groups, and I love doing so, it is a little more interactive and face to face and talking back and forth and asking questions about camp. So the whole virtual setup's a little bit different. So I'll try to give good information, but please keep whatever questions or thoughts you have in your mind for the end, and I definitely would love to engage with that. It's just tricky with the technology. So I'm going to give you like a 90-second rundown on the history of diabetes. So most folks have heard of diabetes. They're more familiar with type 2, which is completely different than type 1. As type 1 is an autoimmune disease, there is no cure for it. Once you have it for life. Where type 2 is really affected by a lot of lifestyle choices and obesity and food and drugs, alcohol, different things like that. So diabetes, type 1 diabetes, was actually not so much discovered, but it was written about 3,000 years ago by the Egyptians. So that's where it first came into literature about this disease. And really, they describe the disease as the disease that wastes away people. So they starve and they waste away to skin and bones, and they really couldn't quite figure it out. And throughout the years, this carried through in all the medical journals, but diabetes is attributed to the Egyptians about 3,000 years ago. In 1899, there was a doctor who removed the pancreas of a dog, and he just left it out, and found out that by removing the pancreas, it allowed the pancreas to essentially develop diabetes. And so he started linking this back to it. So kind of the unofficial mascot of diabetes is a dog. And so we've got a statue of a dog on site named Tin as well. So fast forward a little bit to 1921. There's a doctor up in Canada named Frederick Banting who basically started doing more extractions on the pancreases of dogs, and he was able to isolate these cells, and they weren't quite sure what it was. So he brought in another doctor called Charles Best, Dr. Best. They worked together, and they removed the pancreas. They removed all the different cells. They injected it. They went kind of back and forth, and they're like, wow, we realized that if we put in more of this chemical into the pancreas, it gets better. If we remove it, it comes out. Thus, that was the first time they discovered the hormone of insulin. And so that was back in 1921. At the same time, the Cleveland Clinic was founded up here in Cleveland. Dr. Banting in Canada discovered the cells for insulin, but he had no way to synthesize it, purify it, mass produce it. Canada was a little bit behind the US in terms of medical. So they made the journey to Cleveland, where they hooked up with the newly formed Cleveland Clinic and a doctor called Dr. Henry John. So Henry John, Dr. Banting, and Dr. Best all worked together to continue extracting insulin, trying to purify it. And at that time, they were taking insulin from cows and pigs and things like that. In 1922, so less than a year after the discovery, so January 14th, they injected the cow insulin into a 14-year-old boy. He was the first person to do it. He was in a coma when it happened, and within minutes of receiving the injection, he came out of his coma. He lived for another 14 years after that. He eventually died, but he died due to pneumonia. So nothing to do with the diabetes. So Dr. Henry John said, this is amazing. This kid was in a coma, diabetic coma. No one knew exactly what it was. This is life-saving treatment. We figured it all out. We need to do further clinical trials on the children. We have to make sure that, we do this for the kids. So in 1928, they purchased a piece of land in Newberry, Ohio. And in 1929, Camp Homita Koda was founded by Dr. Henry John. In that first summer, they had 6 children in their cabin with them, and they used camp as kind of the testing grounds for longer term clinical trials with different age children from 6 years old to 17 years old that first summer. And then it continued to grow and grow and grow from there. So Camp Homita Koda currently, remains as the first and oldest camp in the world for kids with type 1 diabetes. And the historical value of it goes far beyond that. Some of the people who helped start Camp Homita Koda also helped found the American Diabetes Association and all sorts of different things like that. It's interesting to note that back in 1921, when Dr. Banting discovered insulin, the hormone insulin, he sold it to an American named Eli Lilly so he could start mass producing it in the factories in the United States. And he sold him the recipe or the patent for only $1. And, with the agreement that because it was a life-saving drug, life-saving hormone, that the price would never be, put out there so it's out of reach of people, so that it could be accessible for all. And now in 2021, insulin is in the top 10 most expensive liquids on the planet. And so you hear, unfortunately, stories of college students rationing their insulin and dying, or using, poor quality insulin, things like that. So fast forward from, the early 30s all the way to 2017. That's camp shifted organizational managers a few times during that. And in 2017, there's an organization in Cleveland called the Diabetes Partnership of Cleveland. And through some truly just kind of mismanagement of the program, the organization ended up dissolving and they closed camp for good. And that was in April. And so in that same month, a group of volunteers and parents and staff came together and said, there's no way that we're going to allow camp to close. It means so much to the community. It means so much to our families. So they formed a nonprofit called the Camp Homita Koda Foundation, and that's who currently operates camp. And so in many senses, it was a 90-year-old startup at that point, because nothing carried over from the previous organizations. No contact list, no camper list, no donor list, nothing. So starting from scratch. So since 2017, the foundation has been in charge, and we have done a phenomenal job turning camp around. I mean, we brought in the right people. We did what needed to do to get camp turned around. And in 2019, we had more campers enrolled than at any other period in the last 90 years for it, which is great. And we started getting, national recognition, things like that. Unfortunately, COVID hit in 2020. Camp was not immune to, all the downfall. And so we did take a hit. However, I truly believe in the mission of what we're doing. I truly believe that camp changes lives. I've seen it, firsthand. So we pulled together. We were not allowed to operate camp in the state of Ohio per the governor until June 15th. We were planning on starting our first session something like June 18th. So we had to shift everything back. We had to come up with contingency plans A through Z, because we weren't allowed to use a pool. Then we weren't allowed to cook. Then you had to have groups of 10. And so we worked, we bent over backwards trying to make it work. And as a result, Camp Homita Koda is the only summer camp in the entire country for campers with type 1 diabetes to operate in person in 2020. So there are about 300 different diabetes programs in the entire country, and we're the only ones who operated. And not only do we operate, we did so safely, successfully. We had 0 issues. We locked everything down. We created really in-depth COVID mitigation and operations plans. We had a camp bubble. Staff were quarantined on site for 7 or 8 weeks. They weren't allowed to leave at all. Contactless drop off and pickup. And, our goal throughout this whole thing was, if we removed the social component from camp, it's just not camp anymore. So how could we move forward to really, give something back to the kids that they desperately needed? So we know, and research has shown that during the spring of 2020, that mental health issues with youth were on the rise, that depression was on the rise, that suicide was on the rise, that child abuse was on the rise. We know that the largest homeschool experiment in history failed miserably in April, May, and June. We know that kids were isolated from their parents and isolated from their peers. And the more we thought about it, when people are saying you need to shut down, shut down, shut down, all we thought about is, this is when kids need us now more than ever before. In the last 100 years, this is where we need to step up. This is where we need to be a leader. This is where we need to provide a sense of normalcy for our kids. And it was great. We did it. And of course, there were families who were a little nervous and didn't want to come, which was totally fine. But successfully, had 150 campers coming down to a modified program, and it's been great. 2021, we are on track to open up, barring anything crazy. And there's still a lot of challenges, but the way that we were able to operate camp in 2020 has really given Camp Home Mita Koda a national presence. So much so that we are keynote speakers at international diabetes conferences. We're currently in the middle of an American Camp Association National Conference now, where we're highlighted. We co-authored a book called Connection Without Contact. So activities that folks could play to keep that social connection without having a physical contact for it. So we're doing a lot of really great things at camp at a time when kids need to connect more than ever before, and especially now, because only partial kids are in school, some are virtual, a lot are hybrid. So camp is great. And if you've not been to camp, I would love to extend an invitation for you all to come check it out. It is one of the coolest places, and we want to be an asset to the community. We want to be a gathering place for the community. And, in doing so, we have partnered with a lot of organizations to make camp their home as well. And so in addition to our diabetes camps, we host a camp called Massillon for kiddos with multiple handicaps, so mostly mental handicaps and Down syndrome, things like that. We host a program in collaboration with Cuyahoga County called Camp Hope America, which are children who've been removed from domestic abuse situations and have witnessed violent crimes within the home for it. And then we partner with a camp called Camp Lilac, which is an LGBTQ camp that comes out. So we have a lot of underserved populations, and in the off season, we serve as home to a school called Chagrin Valley School. And so they don't have the opportunity to be in a building with the restrictions and things like that. So their classroom is camp, and they use the dining hall and the great hall and healthcare center and all sorts of things like that. In a typical summer, we offer a lot of the same activities you would imagine or you see on TV. So arts and crafts and songs and games and skits, but we also really, want kids to be active and healthy. And so there's a lot of outdoor activities that we do, including canoeing, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, rock climbing, mountain biking, swimming, archery, tomahawk throwing, zip lining, all sorts of things, in addition to diabetes education and management. So we really want to empower them to come in and learn how to give themselves injections or change their own pump sites or figure out their own dosing at meal times. But above all, we just want to be a kids camp where we provide these children the opportunity to feel normal. Schooling in general, they're not well equipped, and the nurses are not well equipped to handle type 1 diabetes. In many schools, there's only one nurse for the entire district, and so secretaries are trained to give insulin, which is not great. And so this is a chance for kids to feel normal. It is a chance for them to create lifelong friendships and memories. It is a chance for them to push past their boundaries and do things that they never thought possible. And one of those things, I started thinking about this past year is In times of chaos, in times of uncertainty, in times of just really hardship, like we've been having with COVID, instead of saying, "Oh, this is a bummer, let's just get through it," I took it as, "Wow, what an amazing time to innovate our program. What an amazing time to look at what we're doing right and wrong and continue to push beyond other programs." So come 2021, COVID or not, we were ready to hit the ground running and able to serve the community and campers more. And that's when I started chatting with Lion Ernie and Maureen and a few folks about the LCIF grant. And it's something that's been on my radar, and I think it's been on the Lions radar as well. And there just wasn't the timing and everything. But we got together, had a talk, and basically said, here's what camp really, really needs. So camp is 92 years old. And while we are, moving forward into the future and we're upgrading and this and that, we also don't want to feel like we're 92 years old. And some of our buildings kind of reflect that. And so back in 1929, when camp opened, they were not thinking about 2021 and, is the facility winterized? What does the well look like? And things like that. So over the past few years, we've been raising funds and doing fundraisers and events in order to get the money to really upgrade camp to set us up for success in the future. And one of those things is, really taking, if we claim to have a world-class program with world-class staff and world-class facilities, like we need to have that. And so we started talking about what's really needed at camp. And a big thing really is the transition into turning camp into a year-round facility. So that way we're not just serving our community and our families for 6 weeks of summer, where we have the ability to serve them for 12 months year-round. And so part of that is through winterizing the facility. And so we were able to add some HVAC and insulation and stuff to our dining hall. We're putting in a brand new well right now. We're kind of cleaning up different areas, but our cabins are ones that, really, really needed the help. So the last time the cabins were maintained was in 1998. Was the last time. And so there's a lot of physical damage just from exposure and trees falling down and the wind and snow loads and things like that. And so that's what we put forward. Hey, we would love to get these cabins redone, because not only is it going to, match our vision of having a world-class facility, it extends our reach into the community for not just for camping, but for serving the community and rentals and church groups and winter camps, spring camps, weddings, retreats, all sorts of stuff. So we're an asset to the community right there. And so we moved forward with it. The Lions graciously, supported the project, and many of you all raised funds for it, which is fantastic. And so in total, we received $60,000 to go towards the project. And that project will focus on our 8 main cabins. So 4 girl cabins, 4 guy cabins. And it will, aside from completely tearing them down and rebuilding, everything else is going to be done. So brand new roofs on there, internal and external painting will happen, new fans, new doors, new screens. We're going to put insulation. We're going to pipe gas to it, turn it into year-round cabins as well. And so we could start hosting the community, start hosting camps and teen weekends. We already, with these additions, we've already started booking parent respites and retreats for the families who are extremely overwhelmed with the diabetes. A lot of single mothers, so divorce rates in families with kids with diabetes is extremely high. So we're doing support groups and retreats for single mothers and helping provide respite. And, we'll take the kids while they're in a community of peers and they get to talk and learn and cry and grow. It's going to allow us to, our approximate guess is that within the next 5 years or less, that these cabins will directly serve 5,000 people or more in some capacity. So we're really, really excited. We're really, really grateful to everyone who's been a part of it. So thank you for that. And come check it out at camp. We want you to see it. We want to be a part of it. I know Lion Ernie is extremely excited. He sits on our facilities committee. He assists with all sorts of projects around the area, and he's seen the power of camp kind of firsthand. And I think that's kind of what got him involved for sure. So with that, I want to respect timing and stuff. So I'll open it up for questions. Anything you have about the history or where we've been, where we're going, the programs, the staff, anything like that.
Hi, Ian. This is Bill Smith.
Hi, how are you?
You say we and us a lot, and I'm just curious, what are those people? Who are you? In other words, how many are you? What kind of training do you need to be involved with? And are you paid, or are you all volunteers? Just curious about your organization and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I say we and us because I hate saying I. It is absolutely a team effort in everything that we do there. So short answer is, when the foundation took over in 2017, it was run by volunteers, very well-meaning, passionate volunteers who also had full-time jobs and zero operational management experience of camp. And so, they saved camp, and they got to 2000, they got through 2017, they got through 2018, and they're like, wow, if we're going to make this happen, we need to transition from a volunteer-run organization to an employee-run organization. I grew up in Ohio, but I spent the last 8-10 years in Boulder, Colorado. And we recently had, almost 3 years ago now, a second child. And so we decided, like, hey, let's move back home where our family is. So they started looking for an executive director at the same time that I was coming back. And so timing worked out great. And I came on board as the first full-time paid staff. And so I am paid to be there. That was in 2018. Now we're at 2021, and we have 5 full-time paid staff out here. So we've got a foundation administrator, like an administrative assistant. We have a healthcare manager who handles all of the medical and the healthcare. We have a full-time facilities manager, and then we have a camp director in operations who runs a lot of the programs itself. Outside of those 5, we have a volunteer board of directors of 15 different people, including doctors that represent all of the hospital institutions that we work with, including Akron Children's, University Hospital Rainbow Babies, Cleveland Clinic, and Metro Health. And then there's a mix of parents on the board. We had Kristen Warzoka, who actually her term just ended, but she's the CEO of the Greater Cleveland Food Bank, different things like that. And so 5 paid staff, 15 volunteer board members, and then we really do work with an army of volunteers. And so 5 people running a year-round program is really difficult to do at times. We're 75 plus acres. We've got 52 buildings on site. We're trying to transition to a year-round facility. So we do rely heavily on volunteers who come out, and they help with anything from painting to raking leaves, chopping wood, or simply filing applications, like whatever needs to be done. So we want to involve people as much as possible.
Excellent job, Ian. I really appreciate the effort you're doing, and it really sounds like a great organization. I just want to reach out to the rest of the club. If you do have a question, make sure you unmute by hitting the little microphone to ask a question.
Yeah, we have Lion Jim has his hand up. Can you unmute yourself?
How's that?
Perfect.
Great. Well, I want to thank you also. My son is a type 1 diabetic. He was diagnosed at 15 months.
Okay.
And he's a patient in Akron Children's. Now, is the Akron Children's endocrinologist part of your camp? Because I know they have a camp every year.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So while I mentioned that there's over 300 diabetes camps in the country, only 6 programs actually own their own property. So we're one of those 6 out of the 300 plus. So a diabetes camp that is based out of hospital is traditionally only 3 to 5 days total for the entire year. So that's what sets us apart a little bit, is that we want to be an asset year round. That's why we want to expand our reach. So a board member of ours named Dr. Naveen Uli just transferred from University Hospitals to Akron Children's as the head of endocrinology. So he oversees the entire department that's
Wow.
there. And so that helps out. We have another doctor who's a pediatrician down there named Dr. Kim Shookman, who's works with us very closely. So Akron is interesting because they operate their camp out of Camp Wainoa in Green. And they run 2 programs, one for younger kids, one for older kids, but they're only 2 days apiece. So it's Monday, Tuesday for younger kids, transition day Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday for older kids. I know that they're actively looking to move out of Wainoa because the difference with camps like that is they don't come with their own staff. So they come with their own doctors, but they take 1 day to train their host site's staff. Like, hey, everyone, here's your crash course on what type 1 diabetes is. Here's how you count carbs. And they're talking to, 17, 18-year-old kids who can't take care of themselves, let alone, a whole bunch of kiddos with type 1. However, technology is getting incredibly great that, there's not a whole ton that needs to be done. So the difference is we employ a year-round healthcare manager. 90% of our staff have type 1 themselves, and we go very, very in-depth with everything. So even if you come in, so I personally do not have type 1, and I could probably speak to it more than someone who's had it for 30 years. And you've clearly experienced it as well. And the mystery of it is you could be doing the same thing and be totally in range for, a year, and you wake up one day and you're like, I'm 36. What the heck just happened here? And then 2 hours later, you're 300. You're like, I give up. I don't know what to do. So it's a very unpredictable. So we choose we're trying to get that camp to come to us because our level of care is just so incredibly high compared to some of these programs that it allowed us to safely operate in the largest pandemic in 100 years. And so we feel confident that camp is the absolute safest place for these children to be.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Ian, this is Maureen. I'm just wondering, beyond the grant, do you have like the next big project that you need to have funding for? What's next after the cabins get renovated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're in the midst of putting together a strategic plan, which has drastically changed because of COVID. And the reality is that COVID's not going anywhere soon. So 2021 season for us is going to look more like 2020 than any other year for it. And all of the docs on our team just say, even though we get vaccinated, it's going to become part of our seasonal flu pattern. Like it's just going to stick around. So we're prioritizing a little bit more of what really needs to happen type of thing. And of course, a camp that's 92 years old is also a money pit at times. And trying to fundraise money to keep us going for a single, a chronic disease, really, I don't know how else to say it. It's just not sexy. Like type 1 diabetes is not sexy. It's not like the commercials about cancer you see on TV or kids who are starving in Africa where people reach out for it. So, when you look at the amount of people who have type 1 and die from it versus people who have breast cancer and die from it, type 1 is so far up there and breast cancer is down there, but you have Susan G. Komen, you've got commercials, you've got races, and they make 100 times the money that diabetes does because it's just not like a cool hip thing. Not that any of these diseases are, but it doesn't get the mainstream media. So 2020 has been extremely tough. Not only are we not getting the funding that we've always relied upon, we actually had grants taken back from us to be reallocated to COVID relief, which is, we get it. 2021 is tough too, because a lot of the foundations that we generally receive funding from are wiped out. They're using 2021 to rebuild their endowment to then be able to give stuff in 2022. So we've gone 2 years now without a lot of funding Our 2021 budget right now that was approved in January has us ending the year at about $150,000 loss right now. So we're doing whatever we can. If we had unlimited funds to say, this is our priority, this is our next big project that is going to turn a revenue for us and really push our mission, it would be a continued winterization of camp itself. So we'd winterize our great hall, our kitchen. So we have the dining hall is great, but we can't use the kitchen because, you know, the water is turned off. It's been winterized because it's not insulated and stuff like that. We'd get cabins done. We'd move to get the bathhouse done as well. And then our pool was built in the 1991, and it's got some issues that really need to be taken care of with the pool. Those are the things that we know need to happen and we're working toward. If you came up and are like, hey, I have $100,000 for you, what are you going to do with it outside of facilities? The answer is we want to build a zip line, and we have quotes for it. And a zip line that goes from our archery range across the lake and then ends on the other side. It would be 1,400 feet long, and it would be the longest zip line in Ohio. And so we would be able to have a great selling point for the kids to come, but also, you know, a great thing for the community and families. And getting our facilities up to date is priority, then getting our programming up to date. Because the reality is, programs in the past who are never competitors with us are direct competitors. Technology gets better and better and better. So kids don't need to come to an exclusive type 1 diabetes camp. We want to be able to offer everything that any other camp goes to. So when the mom's like, hey, do you want to go to Camp Wainoa or come here? They're always choosing us, not because it's diabetes, but because we are the premier program in the country. And we're getting folks who don't have diabetes calling in saying how they could be a part of the program itself. So that's kind of what we're looking to do, just further renovations to the bathhouse. And the bathhouse, we had a tree fall on it and crush half the roof. So insurance, we're dealing with insurance stuff right now. And so, yeah, that's what we're trying to get done.
I just had one more question. Like,
Sure.
I think I heard you mention before that one of your goals was to make this camp something that people wouldn't have to pay for. Could you talk about like how the families can afford to come?
Absolutely. So I'll break it down a little. I'll give you the negative first. The negative part of it is I mentioned that the previous organization, Diabetes Partnership of Cleveland, dissolved. They dissolved because of mismanagement of the organization and mismanagement of funding. So in 2016, Camp Homey Koda had an endowment of $4 million in there. And it's actually 2014, I'm sorry. And between 2014 and 2017, the Diabetes Partnership drew down that endowment to pay executive salaries and move in different directions with their programming. None of it went back to camp at all. And they were lying to grants and people saying, you know, how much, or lying to the people who manage the endowment. They're saying, how much money does it take? You know, we want to make camp for free for kids. How much does it cost per kid? They were saying, oh, it costs $4,000 per kid, which it doesn't. And they were getting all of that money and then using it for salaries and benefits and stuff for whatever. So when we took over, we're like, oh, wow, $4 million grant or endowment. That's crazy. We ended up with $3,000 that transferred to us at the end of the day. So ultimately, my goal is to continue to build our finances so we have an endowment that allows camp to be accessed for free all the time, regardless of financials. Kids just need it. And we've taken a step already in doing so. So if a camper is diagnosed within 12 months of camp, they get to come totally free. We absorb that cost for them. Because once you hear that diagnosis, your world is turned upside down, your finances are impacted. And summer camp's the very last thing on your mind. But for the child, it's the number one thing that needs to happen for them to fit in and make get peers, not be depressed, things like that. So in reality, the true cost to us to host one child at camp for 1 week is about $1,350. So $1,300, and that goes toward, we supply 100% of all medication. So all insulin, all syringes, needles, lancets, strips, meters, glucose tabs. We supply 100% of everything. And so that goes to help cover that cost. It goes to help cover the cost of the food and the dietitians and the doctors and our EMR and all sorts of stuff like that. My job throughout the year is to try and raise as much money as I can to significantly drop that $1,300. However much I am able to raise, we use that to offset the parent cost to come to camp. So, for example, in 2019, we raised enough money that we were able to cut it in half. So parents only had to pay $700 for a week of camp. So essentially 100% of campers who come are subsidized. Then we do have a campership or scholarship program, financial assistance, that it's not just based on financial need, but diversity, motivation, extenuating circumstances. Did somebody lose a job? All sorts of stuff like that. Out of that, we have an additional so 100% are subsidized to $700, and then 50% of the people who sign up also, based on poverty guidelines, qualify for 100% off a camp. So there's another 50% who are getting anywhere between 25 to 100% off of $700. And so, in 2019 and 2020 combined, we absorbed a little over $100,000, and we very much truly believe in what we're doing. So we adopted a people over profit mentality, so a mission over margin. And so even though we lost $100,000 in the month of July alone, but it was worth it to us because we were able to serve 150 campers who, to no fault of their own, parents lost their jobs and they're in these really tough situations. And if we could help people, no matter the cost, we're going to do that, as long as we can remain financially sustainable. So it fluctuates. The more money we raise, the less money it is for parents, with the goal that one day maybe there's someone says, hey, here's $5 million for you. And we say, great, camp is free for everybody for as long as there's money in the bank to support it.
Any other questions for Ian? Thank you so much for coming, Ian. That was a wonderful presentation. Since we didn't get to the video, I'm going to go ahead and email that out to everybody.
Sure, absolutely.
So that.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I love talking about camp. Please come visit out there. Like, we love, talking about it. In person is great, but now we're virtual, so you're even that much further away from the program. It is a very special place. We've served well over 25,000 kids in 92 years. And we love that you're all a part of it. So please think of it as a home for you all. And I've offered to Lion Ernie and to you all many times, like, come use camp for free. Let it be a retreat for you all, so you could sit around the lake and go boating and fishing, or have some meetings out there, or picnic or something. We're so grateful for everything that the Lions do, and we would love to pay it back. So please keep that in mind for future stuff. But thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thanks so much, Ian.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Very good.